of the west end of northern Africa and the eastern Asia Minor. Diodorus Siculus, the Greek historian, tells of the Amazons conquering a section of later Atlantis before she sank. European traditions are full of references to an early time when women ruled the civilized world. And there are still many religious sects that pay tribute to the Divine Mother. And what happened, according to some Akashic record readers, is that women ruled the advanced cultures of Europe at one time and long ago in the past. And Sumerian traditions told of the goddess Tiamat coming from the ocean to teach the primitive people the high arts of cultures, a great civilization. And all went well with men and women as equals for a time. And then in several areas, like Crete, the women began to take over and use men as slaves, according to the records. And in pictorial artifacts dug up at Crete, Pylos, Tyrians, and other early Greek sites, women are shown leading men in all areas of life. One stage, men were castrated at one point, and eventually, though, the outlying barbarian tribes of men gained enough strength to overcome the women, and severe laws were put into effect to see that women never regained their powers. And we can look at history and see that cruelty and general barbaric actions against women continued for centuries after these early periods. Medieval laws of church and state, for example, took virtually all of women's rights away. They destroyed all evidence they could find of the early woman-oriented societies. And even today, references many works of the female-oriented societies of old are considered myths. Dig deeply. Go to your library and you can find the truth if you dig deeply enough. So now let's turn to North America. According to the ancient tablets and records, the American continent had been occupied by 4 races and civilizations before the American Indians came on the scene. Well, fossil lake areas of inland present Oregon have obsidian arrow points in the same strata as the Mesozoic age animals. And there are thousands of vignettes and rock drawings that are found all over the West with ancient symbols of the motherland. And some even depict burnt sacrifices to the memory of the fiery death of the motherland. And if you look at it, virtually all ancient cultures after Mu or Atlantis sank included burnt sacrifices in their rituals. Today the origins are lost, but their traditions continue. Churchward felt that the first settlements in the North American continent were in the southwest and probably as old as the Pliocene area. And after a cataclysm, a second and possibly a third civilization started up in the same area. And the later people left rock writings indicating they spoke an offshoot of the original motherland language. And we moderns find a number of artifacts. They include miles of drainage pipe in Arizona and pieces of silver wire screen and sheet plastic thousands of years before plastic was developed, and other advanced artifacts, showing, of course, that we had very high technology here at one time. And pottery, of course, has always carried many symbols of the ancient motherland's language and symbols. And the Hopi and Zuni tribes of the Four Corners area have traditions telling of their original migration from the motherland. They even retain many of these symbols of the original motherland civilization, as we've seen on the pottery and in the symbols. And while the learned historians like to think that they came over the Bering Land Bridge, the Indians know that this is nonsense, because their traditions tell of their coming in ships from the directions of the setting sun. And the historians may call their traditions myths, yet the Indians hold that these myths are true history, and only vary slightly in their symbolic form. And like the South American Indians, they know that there were various floods and cataclysms that raised mountains and altered the face of the earth. And we have a separate presentation on world cataclysm and pole shifts that cover this subject in greater detail. This is in the Incredible Inquiry series. Might mention here that a Nebraska professor named W.R. Gilder found many artifacts in underground living quarters or caves on the American plains. These were mostly filled in with debris after the walls of water swept over the ages ago. Some of the artifacts showed Egyptian-like figures and were hardly the caves of savages. And we know, of course, that prehistoric caves all over the world hold similar artifacts. Well, because the written records of ancient times were often destroyed, there has been another long-lost and little-used way of salvaging history. It was seldom accepted by scientists and historians, but it will prove interesting here, perhaps. After all, we are trying to keep an open mind in this presentation, and the Akashic record retrieval system is based on the fact that all of the past is supposedly imprinted on the vibrations of our surroundings. And persons who can tune in on these vibratory levels can get a rerun on the past. And such persons channel in the experiences of the past and are called psychics or channels if they work through other identities. And the one problem with these Akashic record readings is that not many persons are able to check out the authenticity or accuracy of the information. And quite often, the information just can't be relied on. There's simply an ignorance as to how to check out such information. And such information can be tainted with misrepresentation, or it can be false because of the identity that's feeding it to a channel deliberately distorts it for ulterior motives. Jesus Christ himself admonished us to try the spirits, and in a sense, this is what must be done in accepting this data. We must ask the source if they are of free and under the laws of choice of the one Creator, or if they are of dominion and of the reflection and under one of the gods' system, one of the gods who rules this planet. Because in the other dimension, all identities know their status, and they will respond to you, or they will leave if challenged. Data from dominion-oriented sources can simply not be relied on. Simple as that. Well, we cover this in another presentation, but we should know that there are hundreds of books and reports on the ancients and their civilizations that have come through this channeling, and psychics who are reading the vibrations or Akashic records of the past. And these should not be dismissed. They simply must be checked out, and this is very simple. Now, to show an example, we'll include Molly Rhodes, who's a modern human student who read the comprehension courses of A.B. Glazier and learned to tap in on her higher awareness levels. So let's look at what her ancient soul or record keeper, or computer tapes if you want to call them that, had to say about some of the ancient cultures. We've received letters like these for years, a mixture of Hebrew and English. This non-material fragment or portion of her likes to be referred to as Resilius I. Is that what it was once titled in the past? And it likes to write in the Hebrew language because it is more accurate. To communicate with us, she has to use English. And this inner identity of Molly's states that our species started in Lemuria. It had many strange sizes and types compared to today. This species was definitely not at the lower Neanderthal or caveman level. And these various subhuman species were existing as separate outcasts, along with a more advanced man for many ages. They weren't any more part of the higher culture then than today's mental retards or monkeys are part of our present society norm today. And as the higher alien visitors taught the later Atlanteans and others the higher refinements of civilization, there were super cities and cultures existing at the same time the primitive cultures existed. And the Mideast and Europe are filled with evidence for these higher early civilizations that were offshoots of the motherland. And as we mentioned, these super cities and cultures existed at the same time the primitive cultures existed, since the periodic floods and cataclysms destroyed such high cultures. There's scant evidence for them. But the evidence is enough to know what went on for the truth. When the Atlantean states and cities were destroyed, many survivors wound up in the Hebrew cultures and in the European area of present Germany. And it just so happens that the Jews felt that their genetic stock was superior in some ways, and they kept as much as possible from interbreeding with other races, even up to the present time. And as we've seen, there were great cultures that flourished all over the planet at the time of Atlantis and just prior to her inundation. And as later-day Atlantis had certain warped alien identities take over her technologies and systems, the dominion systems of power and money were set up to control we humans. And such systems, as we can see today, are still going strong. And it could be said that they are of Satan, who was the highest god leader of that time, according to the Hebrew records. And things haven't really changed that much. We're still playing around with the same nuclear weapons as Atlantis did just prior to her fall. And there are still jinn or aliens of some type that are evidently monitoring us. Still. They're not on flying carpets today, though. Their craft at present seem a lot more sophisticated than they once were. And at what point they will restrain our choice actions today is an interesting question. There are seemingly a half a dozen incidents that would show that these aliens have interfered to some extent to keep us from pushing the buttons and blowing ourselves and our planet to pieces. This is another subject which is too long to cover here. So going on to other subjects within our realm, let's look at the New World a little closer. And in Atlantis, the legends tell of a city on an island in a lake surrounded by canals. And in the South American civilizations, many of the characteristics of the homelands or motherland were retained. One example that we can still see is in Mexico City. Mexico City originally was